Welcome back everyone to the world building review of the How to Train Your Dragon franchise. We have a lot to cover, so if you haven't yet, check out the first video of this series for context. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for further notifications. And if you're even more interested, don't forget to follow me on my Instagram page and join my Discord server, both links down below. And now let's get back right to it, continuing with Vikings. Ah, the good old Vikings. Big, strong men and women shaped by sheer toughness. And honestly, rightfully so. Like, they were already pretty tough in our real history, but here, these dudes are tanks! Considering that they have to actually survive these monstrous beings attacking their villages, even if it was for different reasons than they thought, they were able to hold themselves surprisingly well. We could even say that they were just regular humans just like us, but in this new timeline, they had to become stronger and tougher by evolution in order to adapt. Hell, perhaps in this one case, we could justify the fact that they even had the stereotypical Viking helmets because they were recycling dragon horns, even if that design was actually not a real thing in our world. And trust me, as much as they did at least attempt to keep the true spirit and the idea of the original Vikings, if you think I'm not being fair in saying that they're not as faithful, keep in mind that the original concept for the first film was to have everything set on just one island, where half of it would have been covered in fire and lava for the dragons, and the other side would have been completely covered in ice and be the home for the Vikings. And oh, the ways that wouldn't have worked, so thank God I don't have to review that. But anyway, while they were keeping a fair balance between fact and fiction, I still think we would need to have a fair bit of changes to the Vikings if dragons are a constant worry for them. For example, the franchise is mostly set on the village of Berk, where they build houses and have a whole community and stuff like that. But if you have dragons and they've been canonically attacking for about 400 years since the Vikings settled there, why in the world would their houses be made of wood? Yeah, sorry, that would be my biggest complaint about Berk. I understand wanting to keep the Viking aesthetic, but this would have made no sense. You shouldn't build your homes out of the one material most vulnerable to the enemy's main weapon, fire, especially when you're on a tiny island where that resource will run out very soon. And no, little fireproof buckets of water on the rooftops in the second movie wouldn't have done anything even if they did keep them from the start. Instead, it would have made more sense to build these homes out of straight up stone. In fact, not just stone, but make these homes into a straight up igloo shape with a curved dome and everything. Cause the dragons aren't just trying to burn everything, they legit crash through the roofs all the time. So they might have used this design as a way to better compensate for a big heavy thing that would often land on top of it, with maybe like a central pillar for support. And if you think that's not fair because you lose all of the Viking aesthetic, they could still build large dragon-shaped statues on the front to try and scare the dragons away, similar to how Vikings had dragon heads carved at the front of their ships. Or, look, if still not that, then their regular homes should have still been made out of stone. And their big brute new strength could have helped with that anyway, and just cover the rooftops with upward spikes. Basically how we treat pigeons nowadays. Come on, at least that. Honestly, the only real place that they ever built that made any sense to me was the Great Hall, carved literally into the side of the mountain, so why not go all the way? And no, in fairness, while they could have just gone underground for safety from the dragons, it wouldn't have been a good idea to hide there, because dragons already breathe fire and there's already barely any ventilation down below, so if they did hide there, any fire breath attack would have just trapped and suffocated them to death. It's fine if they use them later as the nest for the dragons when they befriended them, since they themselves can be more used to smelling their own metaphorical phosphorus farts, but not before. In fact, if we had kept the show as a reference, it would have just been worse, since one of the polka dragons that we see there are the Whispering Death, which literally eat their way through the ground. And you don't want to build homes where your foundations could crumble, or you could get caught in their path. Geez, thank God I really didn't consider those shows.
I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
As for the Vikings themselves, I do have one very big dragon-shaped bone to pick. Cause look, I get that they have to keep the Viking aesthetic, but why didn't they just recycle the dragon scales as part of their armor from the start? Seriously, they were more than willing to do it after Hiccup and Toothless became friends and changed their whole society, but not before? Their scales are super resistant and fireproof, and could have been absolutely useful against a dragon's breath. And yes, they really are fireproof, because in the third movie, Hiccup grinds down Toothless's extra scales to a paste and paints it over his new mechanical tail, so that it will have the same fireproof properties, so it's definitely confirmed.
Well, I guess you know the tail is fireproof.
And we can't even say that they refused to use more dragon scales out of moral reasons after they befriended the dragons, because in the third movie, Hiccup mentions that apparently dragons shed their scales on their own anyway.
Dragon scales! Dragons shed a lot.
So yeah, even if we assume that Vikings would have been too proud to fully protect and cover themselves, either way, they should have had at least some of their scales as protection from the start. Fur is probably the last thing you'd want to have. And wait, what am I even saying? Drago Bloodfist, the villain of the second film, already had a cloak made of dragon hide, and it was completely fireproof. And the dude had that thing for 20 years before Hiccup befriended Toothless, considering Stoic's flashback, and they explained this as if it was some big shocking secret.
Into our midst came a stranger from a strange land, covered in scars and draped in a cloak of dragon skin.
You had proof right there that it was possible, come on! With that said though, at least all the fashion choices after the first film are very legit. Absolutely no issues there. Even if they should have popped up earlier, but oh well. Then there are a couple more things that the Vikings should have done in order to adapt to dragons. For example, their shields. Most of the time we see that they're made of wood, which again is probably the last material you'd want. Viking shields worked great in our world because they were small enough to be maneuverable, which is an advantage when you're in close combat. And the horizontal planks of wood were made so, both for easy construction purposes, and because an enemy's weapon could get stuck there, giving you an extra advantage to disarm them. But in this case, the Vikings were fighting fucking dragons! So there's no reason to keep these designs, and they could have been bigger for better body coverage. But okay, I get it, the animators had a specific job. Keep the Viking aesthetic. So if you have to keep this round shape, at the very least it would have been beneficial for the Vikings to have their shields be made of wood, sure, but at least with a full layer of metal on top of it. This way the metal will offer a better protection against fire and won't burn, and even if it were to melt away, there's the second layer of wood right underneath for emergencies. And while wood can catch fire, it at least won't immediately disperse the heat, so you have time to hold most of the shield without burning your hand. Something similar should be applied to the ships, by the way, because while the water below obviously can help put out the flames, the ships will catch fire on the surface, so you might as well push sheets of metal on top of it on the deck. Ships can hold a lot of weight anyway, and even then, in our modern day, we proved that ships can be made of metal and still be fine. Unlike, again, what the animated show tried to point out. Okay, so we actually managed to cover a fair amount of the Viking culture. And aside from these small details, the films did surprisingly do a pretty good job with them, so I can't say that there is that much more to add. So now, let's jump on to the next topic. And by the way, real quick, this video is sponsored by me. Cause yes, my book, Grimm, has now been released in 3 languages, English, Italian, and German, and are all available on Amazon right now. It's a dark horror fantasy suspense story about a teenager who has the strange ability to see none other than the Grim Reaper. And one day he has to strike a terrible deal with the Reaper in order to save someone he loves. The reviews so far have been surprisingly good, and I thank each and every one of you who had a chance to read it. If you're also interested in giving it a shot, feel free to click the links down in the description below, or use the QR codes you see right here on the screen for each language. Give it a read, and feel free to leave a review, or let me know your thoughts on this channel's Discord server, also linked below. Thank you for listening, and see you at the next video.